Germany is that country that always seems to be at the top of the rankings in terms of productivity, quality of life, and human development. This major economic power is seen by many politicians, analysts, and experts of all kinds as a true role model. Yet, VisualPolitik community, in recent times, other types of news stories have been making more and more headlines. We are referring specifically to things like these.
Berlin, post-pandemic crime rate surges in the German capital. German police call for knife-free zones in cities. Too much crime, too few personnel. Bremen's police chief sounds the alarm. The increase in burglaries and vehicle thefts is particularly shocking.
You see, as unbelievable as it may seem to us, the truth is that Germany is currently experiencing a very strong upturn in its crime and violent crime figures. Never mind that such problems are often associated with high poverty rates, high levels of marginalization, or lack of law enforcement. Germany, one of the richest and most developed countries in the world, has none of these problems. And yet, crime figures are suddenly skyrocketing. According to official data from the police themselves, the country is facing an incipient wave of robberies, murders, sex crimes, and human trafficking. In this respect, Germany is experiencing its worst period of at least the last decade. Now, you may be asking yourself a question, but Josh, Germany? Really? I had heard it was precisely the opposite situation in mighty Germany. Well, guess what? It's no wonder. Not so long ago, the situation was very different. In fact, as recent as 2019, the situation was exactly the opposite. At that time, truth be told, not so long ago, Germany was boasting.
Germany records lowest crime rate since 1992. Germany's crime rate falls to lowest level in decades.
What the hell is going on with crime in Germany? What on earth could explain this wave of violence and insecurity? Well, these are the questions that we've been asking at VisualPolitik. Questions that we're going to answer in this video. Fire up your engines and let's get started. If we're talking about history, I think it is clear that Germany is a country that has a bit of everything. In the last century alone, we can list 2 world wars, the most intense territorial dispute of the Cold War, a unification of East and West, the creation of the European Union, and much more. Well, in terms of security, Germany has gone through difficult times, particularly in the 1990s. The reunification of the Federal Republic of Germany with the German Democratic Republic, the satellite state of the Soviet Union, brought with it many problems. Reunification meant that communist Germany had to adapt to a new market economy overnight. This meant that many state-owned companies had to close. Unemployment soared, which temporarily aggravated the fact that poverty levels were already much higher than in the West. To make matters worse, the East German police specialized in social control, censorship, and political repression, so it had to be remodeled from top to bottom, not only operationally, but also culturally. The result? Well, as you can imagine, a landscape particularly prone to the proliferation of crime. Of course, the economic situation did improve following reunification, both due to the opening up of the economy and because of the enormous amount of aid the federal government showered on Eastern Germany. And that improvement then translated into a reduction in crime rates. Security improved.
In the 1990s, East Germany was considered the stronghold of crime in Germany. In the mid-1990s, crime in the East was 20% higher than in the West. Then crime in the East gradually declined and was lower than in the West for the first time in 2009.
As a result, Germany improved its safety level to almost the European average, better than countries like France, and worse than others like Poland. Let's just say that the upturn in the crime rate was transitory. It was a direct effect of the absorption of the Eastern Bloc. However, the spike in crime that is now occurring is a completely different situation. With reunification over, what on earth is causing this loss of security? Why is crime on the rise? The Germans themselves have been taken by surprise. Even so, there are already several answers on the table. Do you want to know what they are? Well, let's get into it.
Clarifying the numbers.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty, there are a few things to keep in mind. First of all, we have cheated a little. Yes, crime in Germany has risen, but we are still talking about a European country. Berlin's reported figures for robberies and homicides are extremely low compared to the rest of the world. We are still talking about a reasonably safe country overall. Nowhere near the data coming from the United States, Latin America, or even Canada. For example, Germany reports a homicide rate of 0.76 persons per 100,000 inhabitants, and that is nothing. This is a dream figure for other countries, such as the USA, which reports a level of 6.81 homicides per 100,000 inhabitants, almost 10 times higher. And let's not even talk about Latin America, whose figure for 2021 was 19.91. And although in other areas of crime the differences are smaller, the fact is that Germany is still a European country. In other words, in terms of crime, it is light years ahead of the American countries. Could that change? We shall see. Secondly, we have to be clear about the effect of the pandemic. Its economic impact caused a general upturn in crime worldwide. You know how it goes. Higher unemployment, less income, more uncertainty. Europe and Germany were no exception. If we compare the homicide rate between 2019 and 2020, Germany ranks 6th in the region, where these crimes increased the most. It is enough to look at the ranking to see that the Germans had an evolution close to that of Malta, Cyprus, or Portugal, countries with which Berlin is not usually compared. Now, the problem is not that homicides skyrocketed during the pandemic, but that in the years following, this trend was not reversed. And here comes the surprise. While countries such as Estonia and Lithuania managed to reverse increases in crime, the drop in crime in Germany in 2021 was not enough to completely reverse the escalation reported during the pandemic. And then in 2022 and 2023, the data worsened. And this is precisely the concern of the German authorities. Unlike its neighbors, crime in the country is getting worse year after year, with no clear economic cause to support this situation.
Aber die Situation in unserer Stadt ist brisant. An vielen Orten ist die Situation inzwischen unerträglich geworden. Gewalt, Kriminalität, Drogenhandel liegen dort an der Tagesordnung.
Why so much alarmism if the data seems reasonably good? Well, as we say, it has to do above all with the evolution. With the evolution and with the fact that, in the German case, homicides are not exactly the crimes that have grown the most in recent years. Take a look. For example, in the case of human trafficking, as you can see, the average for the 2020 to 2022 period is 55% higher than that reported for the 2013 to 2015 period. Another similar issue is sex crimes. Up until 2016, they numbered about 7,000 per year, but in 2018, these bordered on 11,200. And then in 2022, they reached their historical peak with 11,896. In other words, the number of sex crimes increased by 70% in just 5 years. Then, other crimes, such as robberies, both common and aggravated by the use of violence, have rebounded sharply after 5 years of decline. They did so particularly after the lifting of health restrictions. Okay, here's the situation. Having clarified these numbers, let's get back to the key question. What on earth is causing the spike in crime? Well, watch out, because here comes the most interesting part of all.
Big fish tank, big fishes.
Dear VisualPolitik community, the size of your success will match the size of your effort. This phrase, generally attributed to the Venezuelan general Francisco de Miranda, seems to be the inspiration for the hundreds of criminal organizations operating in Germany, a country whose institutions are among the strongest in the world. Well, in recent years, the German Federal Criminal Investigation Office has taken a special interest in organized crime. When we talk about organized crime, we are referring to criminal organizations that have a strong operational capacity in Europe, and that, in addition to kidnapping, robbery, extortion, and murder, are also involved in financial crime, large-scale fraud, and political or cultural intimidation. These are all activities that have increased in recent years. In other words, we are not talking about mere petty thieves or swindlers, but real crime organizations. But what is the origin of these criminal groups? What do they do? Do they come from Germany, or do they come from neighboring countries? Well, the first thing that we have to take into account is that, according to reports from the German authorities themselves, many of these groups are involved in what is known as clan crime. Take a look at this.
In this context, clan membership is a unifying component, which facilitates the commission of crimes or obstructs the solving of crimes, while one's own standards and values can be given priority over the German legal system.
Specifically, according to the German authorities, 4 major groups stand out. First of all, we have the big local talent, the outlaw motorcycle gangs. There are around 680 such associations in Germany, with a total of 7,800 members. In this segment, groups such as MC, BMC, Gremium MC, GMC, and Hells Angels MC, HAMC, which have been banned from several European nations, stand out. These entities are mainly engaged in microcrimes of drug distribution, intimidation, and assaults. Then there is what could be considered an old cliché, but is nonetheless a stark reality. We are referring to Italian organized crime, the notorious mafia. According to official reports, organized crime in Germany linked to the mafia increased by 12.5% in 2022. In this case, they are mainly engaged in extortion and drug distribution. Crime linked to Russian and Eurasian organizations makes an appearance in third place. These entities would be led and managed from countries within the former Soviet orbit. And finally, we have the Syrian and Lebanese clans, whose presence has increased in recent years, and who play a key role in drug trafficking and money laundering. As an overview, you can see in this chart what the major criminal activities are that all these groups and others commit in the country. Take a look.
The form of violence used varies greatly, but it illustrates the general violence and threat potential of OC groups. It ranges from verbal threats, hostage-taking, rape and bodily injury offenses, to attempted homicide. It is directed against members of both their own group and those of rival OC groups, or against persons outside the group. For example, family members residing in Germany or abroad.
Okay, and this is where we come to the thorniest issue of all, immigration. As you probably know, Germany has been one of the great supporters of welcoming refugees in Europe, a position that has cost them tough confrontations with countries like Poland, Hungary, and even Denmark. So many of you are probably connecting the dots. Immigration, refugees, and crime. Right? Well, wait a minute, because in this case the data does not seem to go that way. On the whole, the upturn in violence in Germany seems to be linked, above all, to criminal groups. And guess what? Of the 7,200 people arrested in 2022 on suspicion of involvement in criminal organizations, just 750 were immigrants. That's 1 in 10, a percentage far below the proportion of immigration itself in Germany. Let's see. It is clear that the arrival of millions of people of low income and from countries with very different cultures has influenced the commission of crimes. However, the big upturn, the one promoted by criminal groups, is fundamentally led by Germans, or by people who arrived in the country a long, long time ago. And that is not all. Another important feature is that all these organizations seem to believe in the European project, because the truth is that they have woven their criminal networks throughout the length and breadth of the old continent. And so criminal organizations in Germany appear to have a close relationship with their counterparts in Holland and Spain, countries that have a high flow of maritime trade, which is of course directly linked to drug trafficking. For their part, relations with groups in Turkey and Switzerland have to do with human trafficking and financial crime. In this regard, the Netherlands is one of the cases that most worries the German authorities. Why? Because they see the Amsterdam-Brussels axis as a macro gateway for drug trafficking and strong pressures on the judicial system. And of course, they are afraid that this situation will spread to Germany itself.
Ist, die immer brutaler wird. Wir haben in den Niederlanden leider die Situation, dass dort schon Staatsanwälte erschossen wurden oder es gab Folterkammern, die gefunden wurden im Zusammenhang mit organisierter Kriminalität.
At this point, it is clear that the crime problems facing Germany are quite unique. They have less to do with economic marginality, poverty, or institutional weakness, which are the typical ingredients, and more to do with the fact that the Teutonic nation is becoming the operational base for a number of European crime bigwigs. But what is the German government doing to reverse this situation? There's a lot of diagnosis, but who will dare to take the first step? Well, pay attention, because in Berlin, it seems that there are more doubts than certainties about how to face this problem.
An elephant in the room?
For now, the German authorities' diagnosis of the crime upturn is, to put it mildly, rather guarded. First of all, law enforcement spokesmen believe that the current statistics are difficult to compare because of all the changes in social habits that have taken place in the wake of the pandemic.
A significant basis for the increase in tax rates would be the failure of the Crown tax cuts and thus the return to normal public life. More freedom of movement also means more opportunities for criminals.
The problem? This seems like nothing more than an excuse. Because, you see, yes, the return to normalcy has allowed many crimes to be perpetrated again, but that would explain the return to 2019 levels at best. However, the evolution has far exceeded that pre-pandemic level, so that does not seem like a reasonable explanation. If we exclude the homicide rate, virtually all other crimes have grown considerably compared to 2019, and to that, we have to add that many crimes were already in frank growth since 2018. So the German government's explanation seems nothing but a smokescreen, using the pandemic to kick forward and try to camouflage a very negative drift. As we have seen, the biggest problem is not related to the pandemic, but to the consolidation of a lot of criminal organizations in Germany. That could mean that crime rates will not improve anytime soon. In other words, if nothing is done, the current outbreak could be here to stay. As we saw earlier, at least 100 more organizations are operating as of 2020 than there were before the pandemic. This is what explains a 2023 marked by news items like these.
Germany, Italy clamp down on Italian mob with raids, arrests. Austria seizes vast weapons cache in far-right biker raid. 13 defendants acquitted in the Hells Angels trial and sentences of up to 2 years for 32 others.
So you see, the German security forces are facing their biggest challenge since the reunification of the country. That said, the question is, do you think these criminal organizations in Germany are here to stay? How would you deal with this problem? Leave us your impressions in the comments and let's start a debate. And now, if you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so. Thank you for being there. All the best. See you next time.